I met Nathan during the summer. I stopped pretending I was okay. It was the kind of summer where the air felt too thick to breathe, and even though the sun burned bright over the city, I couldn't shake the cold I felt inside. I had just turned 23, recently graduated, living in a shoebox apartment with second-hand furniture and dreams that were starting to rot from disuse. That summer, I worked at a downtown bookstore, half to pay rent, half to avoid being alone with myself. Nathan came in one afternoon when the store was mostly empty, wearing a dark grey t-shirt and jeans that fit a little too well. He had that careless, confident kind of beauty that felt dangerous. Messy hair, tired eyes, and a mouth that looked like it knew too many secrets. He wandered around the poetry section like someone who had never been afraid of feeling too much. And when our eyes met, just for a second, I felt something stir that had been asleep inside me for a long, long time. He didn't speak to me that day, just bought a collection of Pablo Neruda poems and left. But I remembered his face, his quiet intensity, the way he didn't flinch when our eyes locked, like he knew I was looking too long but didn't mind. The second time he came in, he stayed longer. He drifted from poetry to philosophy to fiction, and finally, to me. "You ever read this one?" he asked, holding up "The Heart is a Lonely Hunter." I nodded. It's sad, but true. He cracked a small smile. Sometimes that's the best kind of story. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled back, maybe a little too obviously. He didn't flirt, not really. But there was something in the way he lingered, the way his eyes held mine, a beat too long, that made my stomach twist. When he left, he said, "I'll see you around," like it was a promise, and I wanted it to be. Over the next few weeks, Nathan became a regular. He never said too much, but he didn't need to. He had this gravity, this quiet pull that made me lean in, even when I should have kept my distance. We talked about books, about music, about why he hated his job, and why I hadn't written anything in almost a year. He made me laugh, really laugh, not the kind of polite chuckle I gave most people to get them to go away. But there were cracks, little things I noticed. He never came in with anyone else, never talked about friends or family, always looked over his shoulder when we stood too close. He didn't follow me on Instagram, never liked any of my photos. He'd ask me questions but dodge mine. The first time I asked if he had a boyfriend, he laughed like it was absurd. "I'm not really the boyfriend type," he said. Still, he kept coming back, and so did I. Whatever it was we were building, it didn't feel casual. It felt like we were teetering on the edge of something real. The night it changed, the store was closing early for renovations. I offered him coffee, and to my surprise, he said yes. We went to a place 2 blocks away, sat outside, while the city melted into twilight. It felt easy, until it didn't. He asked me about my childhood, and I told him the truth. Conservative parents, a small town, hiding parts of myself so long, I forgot they were even there. I told him I hadn't come out until college, and even then, only to a few people I trusted. I watched him listen, nodding, sipping his coffee, like every word mattered. Then I asked, "What about you?" He hesitated. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'm not out." My heart dipped. "To your friends?" "To anyone," he said. "No one knows, not really." And then, softer, "Not like this." There was a pause, heavy and fragile. I didn't know what to do with that. Part of me wanted to run. The other part, the reckless, aching part, wanted to reach across the table and grab his hand. He leaned in, his voice low like a secret. "You can have me," he whispered. "Just don't tell anyone." Something in me broke. It wasn't what I wanted to hear. It wasn't what I deserved. But I still said, "Okay." Because when you're starving for connection, you'll take crumbs and call it a feast. That night he came back to my apartment. We didn't talk. We barely looked at each other as we undressed. It was clumsy, desperate, quiet, like we were trying to outrun the weight of everything unspoken between us. And in the dark, as he kissed me like he was afraid of being seen, I let myself pretend that it was enough, that I was enough, even though I knew, deep down, that I was falling for someone who would never let the world know he wanted me. The morning after, he was already up when I stirred, dressed, silent, staring out the window like he didn't belong in the same space as the air I breathed. I watched him for a while, the way his jaw tensed, the way his fingers flexed against the coffee mug like he was holding something heavier than ceramic. I said his name. He turned slowly, gave me a look I couldn't read. "You okay?" I asked, sitting up in bed, sheet wrapped around my waist like I had to shield myself from the answer. He didn't reply right away, just looked at me, looked through me, then said, "Last night. Can't happen again." I felt something sharp pierce my chest. "Okay." I think I even smiled. That fake, easy smile you put on when someone steps on your heart, but you don't want them to see the blood. Nathan walked to the door, hesitated, then turned back. "I'm sorry," he said, like it was supposed to make the silence afterward less brutal, and then he left. That was the first time he disappeared. I didn't see him for almost 3 weeks. I checked his favorite sections in the store, walked the neighborhoods I thought he might live in, refreshed his Spotify profile obsessively to see if he was listening to sad music, like I was. I even wrote something for the first time in months, just a sentence. I let a ghost sleep in my bed, and now my sheets won't stop missing him. I hated how much I missed him. I hated how little I meant to him, how he could just shut the door and move on like I hadn't given him something real. But then he came back. It was raining that night, and I was shelving returns near the front when I heard the bell. I looked up and there he was, soaked, breathing hard like he'd run the last few blocks. His eyes found mine instantly. "Can we talk?" he asked. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say fuck you for making me feel like nothing. But instead, I nodded, because some wounds still open themselves for the same knife. We went outside, under the awning, while the rain came down like a secret trying to scream. He shoved his hands into his pockets, couldn't meet my eyes. "I didn't come because I was scared," he said. "Scared of what?" I asked, though I already knew. He let out a breath. "Of being seen, of wanting this, of what it says about me." My chest tightened. "And what does it say about you?" He shook his head. "I don't know. I've never let anyone in like that. Not another guy." "So I was an experiment," I said flatly. No, it wasn't like that. I swear." His voice cracked a little. "You were safe, too safe, and that scared me more than anything." There was a pause, and in it I realized something. I didn't want to be someone's secret, not again, not anymore. "You can't keep showing up like this," I said quietly, coming close and pulling away. "That's not love, that's control." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. I never said it was love. And those 6 words hurt more than anything else. I turned to go back inside, but before I could, he grabbed my wrist, gently, desperate. "Please," he said, "I don't know how to do this, but I want to try." It would have been easier if he'd just walked away, if he'd let me hate him. But instead, he gave me just enough hope to stay tethered to him. So I said, "Okay." And for the second time, I let him in. The thing about being someone's secret is that it doesn't start out feeling like prison. At first, it's exciting, intimate, like you're part of something sacred. Stolen kisses, long late-night texts, a hand brushing yours under the table. He even started coming over more. I learned the little things, how he took his coffee, how he always had to sleep on the left side of the bed, how he flinched whenever my phone. But we never went out. Never held hands in public. Never posted anything. I'd hear him make excuses when friends called. I watched him duck out of rooms if someone mentioned queer topics. I even saw him lie to someone once, say he was seeing a girl named Lila from his gym. I wanted to ask him, "Am I less real than your imaginary girlfriend?" But I didn't. Instead, I told myself I could wait, that he'd come around, that one day he'd love me out loud. One night we lay in bed, sweat cooling between us, his head on my chest, his fingers tracing the tattoo on my ribcage. I whispered, "Do you ever think about telling someone?" He didn't answer, just went still. So I added, "About us?" He sat up. "Don't ruin this." I blinked. "Ruin what?" "This," he said, waving vaguely at the air between us. "What we have." "What do we have, Nathan?" My voice trembled. "Because right now, it feels like I'm dating a shadow." He got up, started getting dressed, and I knew I'd crossed a line. But what kind of love lives only in the dark? What kind of love asks you to erase yourself? As he left that night, he didn't say goodbye. And I didn't cry. Not then. But the storm inside me was starting to build. The days after he left felt like limbo. I'd go to work, shelve books, make coffee, smile at customers, but inside I was unraveling. Quietly, slowly, like thread slipping through a needle that no longer knew what it was trying to stitch together. Every part of my life had begun to revolve around Nathan without me even realizing it. I started associating every song, every poem, every stretch of silence with him. I'd hear someone laughing in the distance and think of how rare it was to hear him really laugh. I stopped writing again, not because I had nothing to say, but because everything I wanted to say felt like it belonged to him. A week passed. Then two, and just when I'd started to accept that maybe he was gone for good, he texted me, "Can we talk?" Just 3 words. But they cracked something open in me that I'd worked so hard to close. I should have ignored it, should have remembered how it felt to be treated like a ghost he borrowed. But instead, I said, "Yeah." He showed up at my door like he'd never left. No flowers, no apologies, just Nathan. Messy, haunted, beautiful Nathan, standing in the threshold like a promise I still wanted to believe in. We didn't talk at first, just sat on the couch in the half-dark, the air between us thick with everything unspoken. "I've been thinking about you," he finally said. "I figured," I replied. He looked down at his hands. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know what this is supposed to be." "I think you care," I said softly. "I think you care a lot. But I also think you're afraid to admit that what we had wasn't just sex. That maybe it was the first time you let yourself feel something real for someone, and that someone happened to be a man." He winced like I'd struck a nerve. "I'm not judging you, Nathan. I know what it's like to be scared of who you are. I've been there, but I'm not going back there for you." "I don't want you to," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Then what do you want?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. So I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. He looked at me like I was killing him. "You're not ready," I said, "and I can't keep bleeding for someone who won't even admit I exist." He didn't move, didn't beg, didn't say a word. Eventually, he stood, walked to the door, and just before crossing the threshold, he paused. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and then he was gone. This time, for real. The months that followed were hard. I tried dating, tried meeting people who smiled in public and weren't afraid to say the word boyfriend out loud, but no matter how kind, how funny, how ready they were, I couldn't feel anything. Because somewhere deep inside, I still ached for the version of Nathan that might have existed if fear hadn't swallowed him whole. I hated that a part of me still belonged to a man who was too afraid to claim me. But healing isn't clean. It's not linear. And love, especially the kind we hide, has a way of branding you deep. I started therapy, started writing again, started learning how to love myself in the daylight. And then, one afternoon, almost a year later, I saw him. I was walking down 6th Street, coffee in hand, earbuds in, when I looked up and there he was, standing outside a bakery, talking to someone. A woman. She was laughing at something he said, her hand brushing his arm. He looked happy, or maybe just practiced. Our eyes met, and for the briefest moment, time collapsed. I gave him a small nod, nothing more. He nodded back. No words, no waves, just a quiet, mutual acknowledgement that something had lived between us, and that it had died. I walked away. And for the first time since the night he whispered, "You can have me, just don't tell anyone," I finally let him go. Because I deserved someone who didn't just want me. I deserved someone who wasn't ashamed to love me. And maybe, just maybe, that someone would be me, first. It's strange how heartbreak leaves behind its own kind of silence. Not the heavy, crushing quiet that comes with grief, but a kind that hums underneath everything. A quiet that teaches you how to live with absence, how to breathe around the shape of someone who used to take up so much space in your chest. After Nathan, I didn't fall in love again right away. But I did something more important. It started small. Waking up early to sit by the window with coffee and my journal. Taking long walks without a destination. Reading poetry out loud to no one, just to hear what it sounded like in the room again. I began spending time with friends I'd pulled away from when Nathan became the center of my universe. I told them the truth, not the polished, neutral version, but the messy one, the raw one, the one where I admitted I'd let someone treat me like a ghost because I was so desperate to be seen by someone. And they didn't flinch. They just held space for me, loved me harder, and in doing so, reminded me that love doesn't have to be hidden to be real. Then came Julian. He wasn't lightning, he wasn't fire or chaos or obsession. He was the calm after the storm. We met at an open mic night at a little queer bar I'd avoided for years, afraid of what walking through its door might say about me before I was ready to say it myself. He was reading a short story about his first crush, funny, awkward, tender. I laughed so loud at one line, he looked up and met my eyes. And in that moment, I felt something unfamiliar. Ease. No tension, no fear, no performance. Just a quiet, blooming warmth. We talked for hours that night. No pretense, no guarded silences. Just two men sharing stories under dim lights, a playlist of 2000s pop, and the soft hum of possibility. By our third date, he reached across the table and took my hand without asking. And I didn't flinch, didn't look over my shoulder, didn't feel like I needed to earn it. That night, I lay in bed, replaying the feeling of his fingers in mine, and I realized, this is what safety feels like. This is what being chosen feels like. Not in secret, not with stipulations, not only behind closed doors. Months passed and the love grew. Steady, whole, undeniable. One night, we were walking through the park, leaves crunching underfoot, when Julian turned to me and said, "It's wild. I used to think real love was supposed to hurt, that if it didn't ache, it wasn't true." I stopped walking. "Me too," I said, "but now I know better." He smiled, pulled me close, kissed my forehead, and in that moment, I felt something unthinkable only a year earlier: peace. But healing doesn't erase the past. It weaves it in. I still think about Nathan sometimes, not with longing, not with pain, but with understanding. He was a chapter I had to write through, a wound I had to feel all the way to the end so I could stop bleeding. A man who couldn't love me in the light because he hadn't yet learned how to love himself there. I don't hate him for that. I just refuse to shrink for anyone ever again. You didn't know yet that real love doesn't ask you to hide. You didn't know yet that you were never meant to be someone's secret. You didn't know yet that one day you'd choose yourself, and that choice would be the most radical love of all. Now, I tell the truth loudly. I hold hands in public. I write stories like this so that some boy, somewhere, who's still being loved in the dark, might read them and remember. He deserves more, because you do. You deserve to be loved in full color, with the lights on, with no conditions, no apologies, no hiding. If someone whispers, "You can have me, just don't tell anyone," you look them in the eye and say, "If I can't tell the world you're mine, then you're not." And then you walk away, head high, heart intact, ready for the kind of love that sees you, chooses you, and never ever asks you to be anything less than whole.